Well, hi everybody. This is Rodasi here, and this is Wild Medicine Recovery. Today, I have with me one of my soul brothers from the beginning of time, the edges of the universe, Ishtar Howell. And I'm going to just read a little bit of his bio here before I go in any further about, and maybe I'll let Ishtar talk about how we know one another. Ishtar is a meditation teacher, a monk, gardener, intuitive, and writer, and I can definitely say I've witnessed his intuition. Um, his childhood was filled with high strangeness and mystical experiences, anchored in a sense of unity with all things. How beautiful is that? I think some of us can relate to that. This unity faded at around age 7. Then age 13, in a car accident in which he lost his mother, he went through a near-death experience, which propelled him on a spiritual path that came to include many hours of meditation per day while a high school student. At 18, and I think that that's about when I met you, he learned a meditation practice called the Ashiya's Ascension and was immediately clear that he had found his spiritual home. Shortly thereafter, he entered an ashram centered on the practice, spending long periods of time in meditative retreat, putting in long hours of service work, and teaching meditation classes all over the world. The wholeness of early childhood and the near-death experience was rediscovered through meditation. In 2008, he left his meditation organization, took an extended break from teaching, and attended university. The years living outside the semi-cloistered environment of the ashram were challenging, but led to a more deeply anchored presence. I can relate to that as well. Subtle barriers fell, opening again to the experience of the world as the self and the self as all things. Ishtar serves as a guide on the path of awakening, helping people recognize awareness and relax into the wholeness that is already there. He also works as an evolutionary astrologer, connecting people to their guiding myths and dharmic purpose. So excited to talk about that as well. You can find more at ascension-meditation.com and awakenedlightastrology.com. Excuse me. And you also have a YouTube channel, yes, Ishtar?
Yes.
Ishtar Ishaya. And I'll add all of this stuff to the notes when this is posted. So welcome, Ishtar. It's so good to be with you again. I would love if you would just open with what your memory is of how we know each other.
Oh, this is great. I like where you started with friends from the beginning of time. I think that might be truer than the actual facts this life, but came at a very magical time in my life. I didn't know it was going to be magical. I was out in Hong Kong at one point teaching meditation, being in a meditation center, and then I was invited. Hey, Ishtar, do you want to go to Michigan? I have to say, I didn't particularly want to go to Michigan in my first 3 seconds, but it's very similar and very to my home state of Wisconsin and very close. And I thought, actually, that sounds kind of great. Let's do it. I'll go. And so off to Michigan I was. And I don't know how I found out about you up in Traverse City to start. 'Cause I was down in Grand Rapids. It's all Western Michigan here, and you were up north, a few clicks, maybe a 3 hour drive or something like that. I think that's maybe the distance. And everybody in Grand Rapids for some time had also been suggesting you all need to go up to Traverse City. And I'd never heard of Traverse City in my life before Michigan. We have our own cherry capital in Wisconsin, so why would I know about Michigan's? And so yeah, I don't know how got your information. I don't know who knew, but I think we were exchanging email and then we set up a time. I remember meeting you at a diner.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
meeting you at a restaurant in downtown Traverse, and I think one of the colleague that came up with me on that trip I think it was Althea, who I think had known you previously in North Carolina or had some exposure.
Mhm.
And there was already that chain of previous association, at least in my colleague, and it felt quite magical. I don't know, something about your face and your eyes, and and being there. And I do remember it was either the first visit or a subsequent one. It was the first one. I got to see a baby.
Oh.
I got to see. I think it was Lauren, right? Little Lauren in her crib, and that was cool. And I think we met your ex-husband or ex-partner who had a Rastafarian vibe. I met him on a crosswalk there I think in Traverse City or in the restaurant or something. And
Yes.
that's I guess kind of a get to be led into the family space, which I enjoyed. And so there and then came back and saw you subsequent time, I think with Valmiki at
Hmm.
one point. So Valmiki came up as well, and those are wonderful visits. And at some point, I got sort of pulled out of Michigan, in my choice ultimately, but it was like, come, everybody come back to Oregon. So I was like, okay. And then I didn't get to see you again out there. So, but that was our first meeting. I don't know if I got your email from someone or you emailed us or there was a phone call involved. Those details are foggy. I just remember you, the diner, your ex, and little Lauren. So.
That is amazing. And I have a memory before that actually, but I didn't remember some of those details. And it just so heartwarming that that's your memory. I love it. It's so important to offer other people space to share what their memory is because you just don't know what's going to happen. But actually, Ishtar, I remember
Hmm.
being in Indianapolis and
Oh,
I was at a center in Indianapolis. What year would that have been?
oh, wait, you were there. Oh shit. That was oh my God. I can't there was somebody that wasn't you. There's one of your teachers, I think, tried to seduce me. Um, and said like she gave me this like sure you all don't want to stay the night and she was anyways I don't want to incriminate anyone for good or
So
bad
funny.
taste in the past but Buman much shorter than me. I'm a tall man. Opened the door, and he had like eyes that were about 1 foot wide. So I got like these great either mystic or cult eyes or both. And I thought we were picking up stuff that belonged to my brother, my soon-to-be brother-in-law's brother, in on our way back from the East Coast. So you were there. Okay, that was 2002, and that was in March of 2002.
Oh, your memory is
April.
something else. Yes, and that's the moment when I was like, I've known this person in all time and space. Uh, that was my moment. And yes, you are a large man, so I was like, the starlight radiance of this young person who was about to embark or was embarking on this adventure of deepening into the remembrance of who you are. I mean, and to me, you were exuding that already.
Hmm.
And yes, and just for clarification for everyone listening, I was living at a meditation center in Indianapolis where I was working and teaching with, and I was living with probably, I don't know, six or seven other.
Oh, wow, you had that many. Wow.
I
It was a little castle-like house that had like a tower turret entrance and a circular door type thing. It
Yeah,
was it was
it was
yeah.
a magical place. It was the
Yeah.
perfect place for you and I to meet with all of our I feel you in the mythic realm and the perfect place for us to have met initially. But yes, then reconnected in Michigan.
Okay, well, I'm going to forgive myself for being foggy about that first one. I was like a little bit like not high on drugs, but more high on my own supply, high as a kite at that moment. Plus like being seduced by a fairly attractive monk girl as an 18-year-old, kind of like or almost seduced, I have to say. That threw me a curveball, I have to say. So
That is so funny. Yeah, I bet it did. Well, Ishtar, our connection is through the Ashias Ascension meditation, eyes closed, eyes open practice, and the essence of that teaching. So I want to talk about that today, but I also want to talk about evolutionary astrology because I really love it as an evolutionary tool. And
mm,
um, I have like this much experience with it or knowing of it, but in that timeless place, in the bigger part of myself, I have a great deal of understanding, like knowing about evolutionary astrology in a way that I've not been formally trained and I don't consciously understand. But when you talk about it, I'm like, yes, that all makes sense. That's what I've sensed this whole time
Mm,
about how this connects to consciousness and the evolution of a soul. So, I would love for you to talk about both of those things and starting with maybe what is Ishaya's Ascension is and why one would practice it, why you would practice it, why you would share it with others, what's the
right,
point? And then
right,
how does evolutionary astrology complement that journey?
right.
That's a lot.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
get away.
and I sometimes am a fan of brevity, so let's see if I overly shorten it. But I've set Ascension up with maybe in my life I was before Ascension involved in a very dedicated meditation, everyday meditation practice at a young age. I kind of started younger, but I was actually a little bit of had some misgivings about opening up what I called the crazy monk can that I sort of felt inside me. I thought I can't, if I go there, I'm going to blow up my life. It's and then after 3 years of not going there, it's like, oh fuck. I think that's the true part down there. Oh shit, I gotta. Oh, if it's the true part, I need to open it up. Okay, fine, let's do it. And so very quickly after doing that, I found myself like, I guess I have to get up at 3 in the morning and take a cold shower and then do yoga and then meditate for 3 hours. Okay, I guess I guess that's what we're gonna be doing. And so I was doing all sorts of like a potpourri. I'll put it of practices from ultimately, I didn't really know at the time, ultimately sort of from different traditions of Zen counting meditation, Zen breath meditation, Taoist style, like sort of Qigong, and I should say Taoist style, grand circulation of breath type meditations, stuff like that. Every day, I was having some experiences of samadhi, of that we could say that the peace that passes all understanding, or the now, as Eckhart likes the now, likes to call it. And
You
sometimes it
sounded
would
just like him.
yeah, yeah. So I was, but it wasn't quite. Then I was gifted, I think, by my first brother-in-law, the book Autobiography of a Yogi, and simply in reading that book, uh, just reading a book, it was as if my chest cavity was being opened up in a good way, and these vistas inside were being felt and seen and discovered. And so I remember I was shopping around for monasteries. This is my senior year of high school, and I'd already decided, oh, I think I need to go maybe take a gap year or two and go to a be in a monastery or an ashram somewhere. That was my kind of compromised position. And so I was getting brochures. Back then they had really lovely brochures, many monasteries, and they looked perfectly lovely, but none of them quite had this sort of music that I was searching for. They didn't have the feel. They weren't they weren't resonating for whatever reason. And so then I come to this chapter and I come to this page in Yoganada's book, and it says like, oh, if you just pray to Babaji, no matter who you are, if you're some kid in Wisconsin, he'll hear you. So like, well, I don't think this is actually going to work, but I'll try it, like, and so I put a prayer out in deep meditation, and sure enough, I felt this like, we're going to really woo very fast. So felt this kind of like sense of like a ball being put into the top of my head, and it's like honey, and it's very pleasurable and expansive. And within this ball, there was like a frequency pitch that I could kind of hear, and then there was a voice, and I have to tell to those watching, I was not prone to hearing voices like all the time. If they came, it was sort of a special occasion that I would maybe pay attention to and mark. And so this was kind of like, here, here's this frequency. Next time it's playing, that'll be your cue. And so it was 2 days later, I was walking home uh, from downtown, little downtown Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and there was my sister and my brother-in-law were on the stoop of our house, and it's like as soon as I hit the block, I could hear that frequency a bit, and then when I was right there in front of them, it was going off. And and then the occasion was I was being invited. They changed their plans. They were going to go to Michigan to learn Shai's Ascension, but that class was canceled. So then another class was set up in Minneapolis, and they said they're going next weekend, this weekend. Would you like to come? We've got your course tuition covered for you. And but I didn't have to have the sentence, the proposition completed before this massive yes was like cannonballed into my body. I was like, yes, yeah, yes. And I was still skeptical. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew I liked my brother-in-law, and when we meditated together, him with his technique, me with mine, I could sense there was something, something interesting going on there. And so I said yes next week. And we went. I was sitting in the room. I was like, oh, these are in English, these techniques. And I was sort of after reading Yogananda, I had become a bit of a Sanskrit chauvinist because he's a really great salesman for all things India, and had this big section on how Sanskrit was the most perfect language and et cetera, et cetera. I was like, yeah, I
Yes,
guess
I know I was
I,
seduced by that also. Absolutely.
yeah. So I thought, okay, they've sorted it. Say no more. But I went in there as a skeptic. My first sphere teacher called me a first sphere skeptic, which I was proud, and I remain a proud doubting Thomas, my birth name. And I don't I mean I tell this story, but I with qualifications. You don't have to have my experience for this or any meditation to be good for you. But in my case, within I must have been 30 seconds of thinking this phrase, short phrase in my mind, and not having to stop my mind, which was my practice was actually I was very good at not thinking about anything through force. I mean, that's what I'd been. I probably could have killed someone because it makes you a little bit too tight, uh, tight like a snare drum. But so I was doing the opposite of what I'd been doing, which is like relaxing, letting go, and letting thoughts populate. And the thoughts were like, "Am I doing this right? Okay, what did they say? Okay, now I think it, and I don't have to think it hard, whatever." And then other things like, "Oh, this is a bunch of shit, man. This is a bunch of bull. Oh, look, I'm here with these bunch of like stupid baby boomers who I didn't have the word spiritual bypassing in my mind. Then I'm thinking something similar to that. These people are just fooling themselves." Then all of a sudden, like 30 seconds into that, I'm like, "Wait, why the hell is my right hand completely relaxed?" Because meditation was like an athletic pursuit for me at that point. I'd have to exhaust myself, and then relaxation would come, and then like what the, and I couldn't finish the sentence, what the fuck, and I felt like I was like in that scene where Neo's being jacked into the fake Matrix, the training thing. He's like, and I was being sucked back into this vast silence that I had not experienced to that depth since a near-death experience at age 13 had sent me there. And I have to say, even though I had reservations, like, let's see if this is fluke, right? It was basically like that whole first class for me was in and out of this vastness with like a lot of frequency, and that it was and after the class, it was like 2 more weeks of just like, whoa, every time I do this thing, I go into this like profound, big, vast, relaxed space. And there at the same time, there might be a lot of stuff moving through my system and emotions and whatever else. But, there was this kind of, I was really impressed. And so I think it was after I had a 2 week trial period. My teachers tried to have me do only this meditation for 6 weeks. It's like, listen, ladies, I'm already doing, they're both ladies, I'm already doing 6 hours a day, of other stuff. And so we had a negotiation. So the guy, it's like, I was like, I'll give you 1 week of exclusively this. And they're like, okay, we'll do two. And so, that was our deal. It was kind of funny, but I started then pestering teachers at teaching centers because at the end of my first year, I'd asked, "Hey, do you have a monastery? Because I can, Anyhow, what is it? Well, it's effortless meditation. Of, and I think And by effortless, kind of like what I was saying before, I didn't have to beat the shit out of my mind. I didn't have to corral it. I mean, most people have probably heard the term, the mind is like a naughty monkey, jumping from branch to branch, never finding peace. And that made a lot of sense to me when I first read it in a lot of books by often modern Buddhists. And they were kind of the developed concentration school, and to a Midwesterner that made a lot of sense because I was raised in no pain no gain kind of culture. And I was like, well, of course not a lot of people are enlightened because they're not willing to put in the work. It's like that's was my wiring. And then after doing this, we're like, no, it's like, of course we're not enlightened because we've been taught that this is hard, but it's not, and it doesn't
Mm.
have to be. And I realized, oh no, most of us have more of a problem with sort of love or falling into relaxing or sort of like allowing things to be exactly as they are. That's bizarre. That was bizarre to me at the time to have this reversal, thinking, that some of the core problems were different than what they were. And this was the first meditation, honestly, that I felt was really like both TM, which is sort of an ascension predecessor in some ways, and the ascension practice use the word charming and words like pleasurable, like instead of trying to chain the monkey, we're giving it bananas. And that's kind of how I experienced this thing. It's like I was really literally, it really felt like I was dropping bananas in the form of short phrases into my mind, and something deep in there was just gobbling them up, and to the point where in like just within the first week, no, the first fucking night, sorry for the swearing, the first night, I was sleeping, but I was awake, which is a bizarre thing to describe. And sometimes while I was sleeping but awake, these mantras that I just learned that weekend were going in the background. And man, I was so juiced up. I mean, I had a deep sleep, but there was this current of vroom, 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 just kind of like running through me. And I was like, by 6 a.m., which was my wake up time that day, because I was like, I went to bed at 3 a.m. I usually woke up at 3 a.m., but then that day I went to bed at 3 a.m., getting home from Minneapolis.
Mm.
And at 6 a.m., I like had ninja muscles happen, just kind of leapt off the ground, and said, I gotta go to the grocery store with my dad. So just like, let's go. That's and so yeah, there was something definitely different in the water, going on. And I'm making it sound like maybe too rosy. I mean, it's still a person who had tensions and traumas and unprocessed grief, from losing my mother 5 years earlier, and conditioning starting around age 6 or 7 that was there. But even with those things being true, and there was this other dimension contemporaneous, which was just like, what the hell is this stream of bliss, this thing, back. So uh, yeah, thanks for letting
Well,
me ramble.
I love hearing your story, and people love stories. And certainly there's everybody who's taken the path of becoming a teacher has some version of your story, and some of them are way less, like you said, flowery or exciting. But I can relate to every single thing that you just said. Some of that didn't happen for me until
Mm,
later. Um, I was driven by this fierce knowing that this is what I needed to do in order to whatever I thought I was doing, evolve, wake up, heal, become, let out what I felt like I was supposed to be in this world, or I was going to die. I mean, it felt so fierce to me, so
mm.
fiercely important to me, and it still kind of does.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's from a different place. I loved your description of being asleep but being awake. And I share that with people sometimes, especially in talking about states of consciousness. As you know,
Mm,
I've worked in the recovery field and work with people who like to alter their states of consciousness.
right.
And
Yeah.
how fascinating. And those people, once they get off from drugs and alcohol and begin to take in practices similar to, or even the practice of ascension, fall in love so quickly because like they're actually kind of masterful at
Mm,
at where attention is at. And once they get the principles of like either I am sober and clean or I'm not, either I'm living this path or I'm not, they start to be able to go, well, like I'm either in this flow of bliss or I'm not. I'm either doing my practice or I'm not. Those kinds of people tend to like, I don't know, it can get locked in pretty
Wow.
more quickly and more powerfully than sometimes the average
Yeah.
person. Uh,
Yeah.
the contrast and the hunger and the desire for it. But one of the things I really loved, I mean, you shared so many beautiful things, that samadhi, that the peace that passeth understanding, that that relaxation can come in such an effortless, natural, easy way, even number one, period. Number two, even when traumas are being resolved and stress is releasing and circumstances in life are challenging.
Yeah. 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 God, I remember it must have been the second day of, or like Sunday of a 2.5 day course in which I learned the thing. And this love technique was, I wouldn't have described myself as a crier at the time. I wasn't, so stoic that I'm holding everything back, but I wasn't like a tear factory of, and my God, I remember it was a beautiful experience to have pain and grief as if flowing out of my chest cavity and out my eyes, out the tear ducts while doing that meditation, and having at the same time, linked with that, the sense of like this flow of something beautiful coming in the top of my head, running through my body, a feeling of just sort of like opening to something that I had been unconsciously pushing away. Like I'm just, oh, that would be the intonation I'd have to, could only use that to match the experience. Just this total release. Yeah, total release.
I
And uh,
Beautiful. I can relate to that too. And in fact, I've had many of those moments where like some new layer of that is revealed, like, whoa, there's so much more. Wow.
yeah, 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 and we both know ourselves, and probably know a lot of other monk types who are, have been frustrated that they're like, oh, I have to feel this thing again, and because we do seem to be built like onions, so and things, tensions get lodged at there's tensions that I've been feeling, releasing in the last 3, 4, 5 years or so, that I kind of knew were there when I was in my early 20s, and was Mr. Semi-cloistered Shaya monk. I kind of could feel them, but nothing, no matter how deep it seemed I'd go, I wasn't ever touching them. And it's just like, and that was at the time like a source of frustration for me. And but then, in the long run, it's like there, I guess, think there's like a bigger intelligence that's sort of governing these processes. Like, now this dude probably needs to do this, and then go through this, and then he'll be ripe at about 30 something to have these things, have have these things release.
Which is
Yeah.
beautiful, Ishtar, and it's so important for people to hear because I know for me, I was like you, like not just monk, which is definitely priestess, monk, whatever, my archetype. When you were talking about like, oh, if I touch into that place and open that can, uh my whole life is gonna explode. But this belief, this warrior belief, this
Mm.
American warrior belief that like I'm gonna get it all right now. I'm gonna get it all right now. I'm gonna get down in there. I'm gonna obliterate all of it so I can be free once and for all. And I was so like that. But the
Yeah.
but the beautiful somewhere along the way, there has been a discovery that we are in this exquisite exploration to experience this life in this body. And evolution, this greater intelligence, this greater flow is doing whatever it's doing regarding this body, regarding the soul, regarding the universe. And like my formula was if there's challenge, if there's still stuff, then there's something wrong. And that
Ah,
changed. That completely
yeah,
changed for me. And this is what I feel like I would love to have you share. Uh, I know that that's not true anymore. Like
yeah.
that is not the truth. That's not the deal. So I would love to have you speak into that because so many people are out there working on themselves, healing, growing, trying to find samadhi in one way or another, whether they call it that or not, and judging the shit out of the fact that there's still something in there, lodged in there, or some circumstance isn't quite where they think it should be. If I were okay, if I were lovable, if I were present, then this wouldn't be happening. So could you just speak about that?
Yeah, well, I might hit that by there's a quotation from Shunryu Suzuki, the great Zen teacher who lived in the Bay Area for many years, and it goes, like we're all of us perfect exactly as we are, and we could all use a little work. And to me, it's like the complete story is the ability to kind of, in my case, it was like to have this great wellspring of zeal, which this zealous part knew that in many ways, I was living a sham and was living out lies, and that there was sort of a deeper purity that I'd touch every now and then, that I would love to accentuate and I would love to let go of my schmeises, basically. And so the new so it's like the zeal was engaged, right? And yet at the same time, I was taught by experience to be quite a bit more forgiving, like Winnie the Pooh. And I think it's if we can have whatever percentage these need to come together in a person, if we can have both of these things kind of in lockstep, not really a paradox, and not a paradox because the judging of self is the extracurricular work, that's going on. Like the first thing they would tell me, because I was like basically right out of high school, to this ashram was like, don't grade your own paper, because as a good student, I was taught to check my paper 3 or 4 times over, make sure it was perfect, as perfect as I could get it before handing it in. That's very good practical advice, of course, but it's not as readily applicable when I'm trying to engage in um, judging something that I'm not really fit to judge. And so the two things went together. Like tight focus led to softening. The tight focus on doing my practice with some zeal led to all these like these sometimes like wordless assumptions. Like this is where I like really came to agree with MSI. I mean, when he would say something like write something like the root cause of suffering is actually something like the notion that there's just something wrong. Which when I first heard that, I was like, yeah, and maybe for 5, 10 years, I don't know, I might have been like, I'm not quite sure I'd phrase it like that. I'm not quite sure that's exactly that, and that maybe it's too simplistic. And and more I'd be like, well, actually, I kind of agree a little bit more. I can see where they're coming from there. That the original tension that's holding all these other sort of errant tensions in place is this kind of just this notion that I and this life are fucked in a way that's beyond like actually, you know, if, fucked up things. That there's the difference between pain and suffering. Suffering being, if you think of suffering as sort of like a metacognition on top of like actual. I did cut my hand off with a saw just now, and that's not a not a pretty experience, right? So yeah, that's I've now rambled a little bit, but that's those two went hand in hand eventually. This like I think I could have been described as type A. Maybe I could still be described in some ways as type A, but I was sure taught to incorporate this sort of like easeful Taoist style Winnie the Pooh, like from the Tao of Pooh, into life. It's like, oh, man.
You you have an incredible combination of those things, I feel. I've always, and most of our connection has been through the universal force. Um, but in the last how many ever years, it's been on Facebook.
Yeah,
And never felt like, while there's a lot of information to catch up on, um, personally, right? Like I've never felt like I didn't know where you were at on the web of consciousness,
mm, yeah,
somehow. And we shared that a bit earlier. Like, there's just I just know where you're at. I can feel it. And that who knows why? I don't need to know why. It's so cool to have those relationships, those connections, and in particular with shared experiences.
mm,
And I've
mm,
valued the purity, the intuition, the sensitivity, the focus, the articulation, the organization of thought, and that safe spaciousness that I have always felt all of those things with you.
yeah, yeah. Likewise, totally.
Mm.
Yep, yeah,
Amazing.
yep.
That's amazing. So I don't know where you feel called to go, but I'm thinking as I'm hearing these, the root stress of the modern world is just this sense, just at the heart of it, that there's something wrong
Yeah.
me, with life, period. At and so I think those grooves that come in, that are karmas or conditioning,
Mm,
well, conditioning of this life, but also karmas. And I'm trying to tie in here. I'm feeling called to tie in here the evolutionary astrology stuff, because, like, if you're told, these words like ego and karma, and people throw them around in different ways. But what's I don't really want to focus on that stuff unless it's helpful for
right.
me to understand this amazing character that I am. So I have some of those in place and they make me this character. I came in here with certain karmas that I think help me remember more quickly than other people who I am, like
Mm,
eternally.
mm, mm.
And I would love to hear you share on that. But also, doing my practice has helped to turn some of those karmas into dharma, and doing some of the work as in recovery, for example, the step work that is encouraged, looking
Mm.
at shadow and making useful what was trying to, like taking me down.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking. You're going way more profound than I was gonna go. Actually, you're talking about the alchemizing of one's core wounds into blessings. Now that's even that's top shelf. Darcy. Let me play in the shadows first, and build up to that, because my first instinct, when you want to tie this in with, say, uh, my 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 view of astrology and astrology practice, I often introduce people to another way of looking at karma, because it's very common, especially in the United States. You hear the word karma, and a very simplistic and really inaccurate understanding of, you know did some say, like, did some shit bad, here comes the hammer. That's a very bad understanding. But one of the a lot of karma, I'd have to say, is actually joy and love, that for whatever reason, if we bring in reincarnation as a structure, which I like to, and dyed in the wool reincarnationist, a lot of karma is joy that we've turned down. And I think of, like, the divine or divinity or the universe, like, all the same to me, as this kind of um, loving agent that's actually trying to get us everything that we've ever wanted. And often it's all too much, at least for the ego structure at the time. So it's like, yeah, no, that's too joyous for me. No, no, thank you. And then the universe is not is not doling out justice with that. It's like, okay, no problem. It's all the same to me. I'll catch you when you're born in this country called the United States,
Mhm.
in the early 1980s. I'll catch you then. That'll be a great time for us to have another tete-a-tete, so to speak, and I'll come with this package of goods for you. And so to me, a lot of it is I see that in a birth chart. I'll see like, okay, look at all this joy that was maybe turned down at one point for whatever reason, and I'll see maybe not so fine grained like going to meet a woman on a pier, you know, 2006. No, I'm not that good. Yeah, I think maybe you can be that good, but more like I'll see like, uh, yeah, take those invitations to go to that retreat center if it comes along. Say yes to things you don't think you deserve. And I think of uh, the figure of Krishna looms large in my mind. As Krishna is often, not exclusively, of course, but maybe throw Lakshmi in here. But these two beings are often getting us enlightened through more love than we can possibly think we can handle. And in the process of saying yes to these things, which are not onerous or burdensome, we don't have to be like puritanical Calvinists in the 17th century who thinks that life is just eating, shitting, and hard work and see what happens, which is big in the US psyche, I have to say, in the basement there. But it's often like, here are your dreams. And it's been fun in my life to have it in the same scope of the same life where some things have come around, and I got to find a good example because it makes it. Uh, actually, no, it's weird. I was once offered like a toy in box condition in my 30s at a garage sale for free that I had obsessed over when I was 5. So that this is not so profound, but it was it did strike me. I was like, Jesus fucking Christ, here you are. Oh, another time. Oh, this is even better because I had a weird obsession with Abraham Lincoln as a 6-year-old. I mean, absolute obsession. I didn't ask what would Jesus do. I would say what would Lincoln do, like WWLD in my mind. And all I wanted for Christmas, I think 1990, was an Abraham Lincoln doll, like a figure that I could put on my pillow and he could be over there while I go to sleep. And my poor uncle was asked by my mother to go find this because he was in DC at the time, and no luck because they weren't making them. 2008, I walk into a shop in Ashland, Oregon, and like from 30 feet away, I'm like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. And yeah, seeing that, I know this might sound like just woo garbage to some people listening. It's just coincidental. Sure, it could be, but then like something in me just erupted in release and joy at both of those things. Oh, the other one was this Optimus Prime. That's what it was. Giant
Yeah.
like a
Heck
mint
yes.
Optimus Prime. Yeah. So Transformer and a Lincoln doll. Those are little small examples. There've been many other little ones that pepper this life, and sometimes it's like, okay, why didn't I get it then? Well, that's fine. Things are just there's a bit of a backlog, and take the joys as they come. So that's a certain bit of what I'll see in a birth chart is like unscratched itches as well. Especially when I look at the south node of the moon and say it's planetary ruler, and and those typically feed into in a birth chart. I find that they very much clear the way for the dharmic expression of the chart. That's my main um, focus with birth chart readings is not so much fortune telling and that whole thing, which was actually astrology before 1900, was mostly that part. But my whole to me, the birth chart is kind of a lens of the myths that are trying to live themselves out through us. And there's this, it might be an apocryphal Jung quote because I haven't double checked and found in the book, so I don't want to spread more BS quotes that are already spread. But it's something like it could be Campbell. People don't have mythologies; mythologies have people. And so that's basically, I think most astrologers, whether they're conscious of it or not, they're kind of being guided by that basic framework. Most astrologers are kind of like Platonists in the way that at some level they're perceiving these small little lives with their short little biographies. are really emanations of much larger flows. Call them archetypes, call them platonic forms, call them myths, mythic tropes, whatever, and so that's the that's it's upside down compared to materialism, of course, but that's the view of myself and most astrologers. And so in a birth chart, you have like a printout in a way of those myths and how they're kind of combining with each other and the types of situations that they resolve in. Like say we look in a birth chart like Pluto, which we see as part of a primordial wound. A person's coming into alchemize, which is where you began the deeper
Mhm.
than Lincoln Dolls.
Yes.
And so we'll look at the part of the birth chart it's in. So we'll look at the fifth house, Pluto in the fifth house. And so for everybody, I'm getting more technical than maybe you want to get, but this simply tells the astrologer there's something very, very profound about artistic expression in this person's life. It may not have to be something they make money with, but it's absolutely going to be kind of a keystone, a keystone element in healing their psyche. They
Mm.
must do it. They must express. They probably will have a million excuses till Sunday not to do it come up and some kind of flack around the process. But if they do it and they go and dive into it, then they can alchemize this bundle of coal into a diamond that's luminous. And so that's the kind of stuff we see in a birth chart with
Ah,
Rama. Um,
I'm so excited. I mean, I just feel like uh what's worth my time? What questions are worth my time to ask if I'm going to look into astrology, and not just be on the surface and not just waste time and be distracted. I just feel like what you're talking about, which is why I wanted to talk to you about this, um, is what is useful, sincerely useful for us. And how beautiful the way that you described. Well, I just see where there's this backlog of joy and love that has been refused
mm,
previously, and that man, can I relate to so many moments of life where it's like there's this love and this joy. I mean, I remember thinking even after becoming an Ascension teacher, like who's got time for joy and happiness, you know? I'm serious here.
no, wait a second. Now you went to the Club Med Fun Ascension world. That sounds like my pod. Uh,
I did, you're right. But you know, it's that I mean, I'm Aries and my South Node is in Aries actually. And my
mm,
Pluto is in my ascendant, which is Libra, which is
first
my
house. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know what that means, and I just looked it up because you were talking about it. I'm like, where's my stuff at? But but I feel like that warrior part of me, like I have to be this is life or death. I've always felt like that. This stuff is life or death. And I'm so happy that I can be that softening that you've talked about,
Mm,
and experience a great deal of bliss and joy now, while still having that zeal and that heart of devotion, you know.
right, right.
I don't know if you
Yeah.
can unpack that with, as an example for how things are alchemized. Maybe it can be an example. I don't know.
Mm, mm, I'd have to take a look at your chart because I'd be curious to see how close your sun and your south node were to each other and if there are any other elements going on back there. But generally, speaking to that, you're going from you're not only are you a warrior in the South Node, but some of the problem. I'll speak to the problematic aspects because there's pros, cons, and neutrals to the South Node. So just for expediency of the story here, but some of the cons are sort of like being too tribally focused in the seventh, too caught up. Sort of you're an individualist, but you're an individualist who's in those other lifetimes maybe losing themselves in group dynamics and in kind of the logic of the group and one's friends and family, that kind of group size. And so your invitation, which is what the North Node is, it's by no means a fait accompli, but the invitation is to kind of almost like leave the war band, which is what I'll call that, Aryan group there. Leave the war band and go become a peacemaker. So it'd be kind of like being a tribal Viking or Native American or something like that, and saying like, fuck it, I'm gonna go be like St. Francis of Assisi and go like, you know, uh, build a church and strum a lute and and kind of there's some need to like give up, to take some of what, take a lot of the good stuff that was learned, like focus, courage, um, certain determination, but then sort of apply that to becoming this sort of like of peacemaker, more or less. And that's a beautiful journey. You might have tried it before if you Pluto's in the first house as well, like conjunct the North Node. In which case, you kind of back to do it again. Might have had a bit of a like a martyred experience in some life, or somehow it might be saying you resonate, some part of you resonates deeply with people who've been repressed for just simply being who they are in some way that they really didn't choose. Whether it was race, sex, sexual orientation, the religion. Even most people don't in history don't choose the religion; they're born into one as a matter of course. But you might have had that sort of experience. So you're kind of moving into being your own person and not having to. You can love the tribe that you're born into, but there's something in you that's like, no, I need to paint in the style that's unique here, and I need to kind of give myself the space to to experiment and explore and to produce something very original.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's an interesting path. That they're also in each other's houses. So you have Aries stuff in the house of Libra and Libra stuff in the house of Aries. So it's like the independent, courageous thing to do is actually to not be so belligerent, but in a way to kind of like allow oneself to sort of have this like beauty response and harmonizing response, be the sort of the first response, and but yet do it in an Aryan way, like saying, sorry guys, just got to do this, you know I don't know, just have a feeling, I'm gonna go try this out.
So what, thank you for that, Ishtar. And all of that is, I mean, I can see that in my entirety of my life. I mean, we were talking before recording about both of our experiences of having been in monastic settings, been part of groups.
Yeah,
My almost like mm, mortal need to have been part of such a
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And the the way that, I started before I left that experience feeling like I was in a shoe that was too small for me. And
mm,
you had referenced like I got to get myself fired,
yeah, yeah,
I kept waiting to get fired because I was doing radical things that I know were outside of the I felt I was anyway, like this isn't
yeah,
acceptable within this culture, and yet I can't not do it.
yeah.
Um, for, I mean, sometimes you just can't help yourself. And that one of those things was writing my book while I was still part
Mm.
of the organization, which was, you know, um, very radical. Uh,
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, how so? Is it a tell-all, or
no,
or
no,
no?
it was just I was writing a book about meditation in general,
Yeah,
and want really out of wanting to really help people. It was
yeah,
during the pandemic, and here I was part of this thing where we did a certain thing, and it was the thing, and you only do it
yeah,
this way, and this is the cream
yeah.
of the crop, and why would you waste your time or distract anybody else with anything else? You
Right.
know?
Oh, got it. Got it. That's sort of coloring outside the lines. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, I can see this. Just lastly, like the visceral sense of survival in this Aryan energy, this tribal energy, this
Mm.
warrior energy, that it and then as life has brought me into softening and softening, and an example in my life right now where I'm like I can't even get away from the softening, and it's wonderful. It's like I've been waiting for it my entire life to just soften into it, just like where I normally would go into that control warrior thing,
Right.
and just the defenses being melted, and like, oh, and feeling sort of what I'll just say, that Lakshmi energy of softness and beauty and harmony and love, it's safe. It's safe.
Yeah.
So tell me, so I'm just saying, yes, I can see everything you just said in what is actually so in my life, just so that everyone can see that, which is
From the battlefield to the art studio. That's how I might define your nodal journey, or from the battlefield to the recording studio. I mean that's sort of that's sort of the flow. Like I'd paint it like you were like being a soldier in like 19th century Europe, and then throwing the rifle down, and then going and painting plein air paintings by the Seine in Paris in an impressionistic style. So that would be like what a story type of story I'd apply to that.
wow. Interesting. Well, I know that you have a way where you can look at all kinds of things and be in service to people, including teaching Ascension, which I feel like is fundamentally, well, it certainly has been fundamentally everything for me, um, in terms of waking up, being present, healing, having something to give to other folks. But this evolutionary astrology stuff in terms of helping to look at those unconscious things. I mean, I don't want to waste time trying to mess around with what the initial impulse is of
Right.
like, I think I need to work on all this stuff. I want to know, oh, this is the thing that scares the shit out of me that I resist unconsciously. I don't even notice that I'm resisting it. And how can I breathe life into that? And so thank you for that. And I'm sharing now for everyone listening who will be listening. Um, this is something that Ishtar could walk you through in a session. Yes, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe just break down, first of all, so Ishtar and I both teach Ascension. I'm only just returning to teaching Ascension after a 3-year hiatus. So either of us, wherever we're at, Ishtar's in Portugal right now, but he does come to
Yes.
the US. Anywhere in the world, anybody who's watching, there are other teachers out there as well.
There are that.
And then, as far as connecting with you for evolutionary astrology sessions to do some sort of therapeutic work, I'm going to call it that. You may not, but I'm going to call it that. If anyone's interested in that, they would just go ahead and share like what that might look like, what they could expect, and how they sign up for something like that.
Yeah, completely. So it used to be when I lived in Portland, Oregon, I was more of I'd say a local Portland astrologer. This is before like Zoom got quite caught on. So back in those days, I often used this wonderful little cafe called the Tao of Tea, a tea house, as my quote unquote office, just as long as I bought enough stuff to pay the rent. I do sessions there. But now since then, I've been doing lots of sessions on Zoom. I could also do it in other ways, but that's sort of my current preferred platform. And so a natal chart reading, a birth chart reading, in other words, of the session is 90 minutes. I prepare like usually a couple hours, or sometimes I'll get a chart much quicker than that, but a couple hours beforehand on my own, and then we meet for 90 minutes. And to me, a birth chart is also like a piece of music, and in the same way that people are musical. Myth and music to me are really equivalent here. And so my job is basically to try to get to be to sort of articulate the strains of that song, especially the ones that are trying to come out. And so we'll talk about the myths that are trying to guide your life, and the myths that are in the background. And it might use psychoanalytic language a little bit. Not going to talk about the id or anything like that, but we'll talk about, it can look at in the chart. There are ego placements, and we use ego in a positive sense, where there are bits in the chart that say like, well, this is who you need to allow yourself to be if you want to be happy. And that's like the sun. In some sessions, I've told people about the sun, and these are for very externally successful people. But then they started crying, and it's like, oh, hey, what's going on? And they're like, well, what you just described was like basically how I was until about age 8. And then my parents basically said, well, you can't be like that. You need to, follow our example. And it worked externally, but they were miserable with what they had. It didn't feel native to them. They weren't living. They weren't letting this kind of daimon, this kind of creative inspiration that's specific to them, to flourish. And so to me, like a birth chart is all. You could also say it's like a mapping of Shakti, a mapping of the like called Shakti in this case, a very particular dance that the divine is trying to do through you, very particular flavor. And so we look at that flavor. We can also see things like fun things like these are what your most natural friends are like. And sometimes there's a couple different cohorts which are very different one from the next. Some people are born to hang out with biker gangs and Hare Krishnas, and they're like, yeah, those are my friends, and I have to tell you, getting a party together is really weird. It's like, yeah, those two groups, right there. Those are them. So we could talk about little things like that, or talk about Jupiter, the joy circuit. And what specific area of life is just, the cat. So some people it's like stationery stores, and it could get that specific, and they're like, yeah, you know,
Wow.
like, oh, God, I see an ink bottle, and I just go off. And it's funny how fine grained it could get. I had one client where I was having these very strong images of them. I was assuming maybe a past life. I danced around those things lightly, and I encouraged my clients to take them worth a few grains of salt, just be loose and listen and whatever, have fun. But I was seeing them as an 18th century uh, intellectual doctor on board a ship, kind of like Paul Bettany's character in the film Master and the Commander on the Far Side of the World, a movie I highly recommend to everyone in here. And I went on to describe. I kept seeing the images of like they have a rock collection and they have fossils and stuff, and then they like stopped me, got their camera up, and they like panned it around like those are my fossils and those are my things, and it was all around. And then he had said, but I have
Amazing.
to tell you, that's Master and Commander, which I mentioned. That's my most favorite movie in the world. And every time I get a chance, I proselytize to people to watch that film. And they played a violin too, like Paul Bettany's character. It's like, hey man, sometimes you just gotta have a part two, a sequel to these other lives. And that's okay that you're not on a wooden boat, and it's not the 18th century, and some of these things just wanna bleed through again for whatever reason. So yeah, there's that sort of thing. It's like these lives sometimes are like, I think there's a therapeutic value in just knowing like it's okay. Some of this music you can't really control it. You can maybe slightly guide it this way or that, but it wants to play through us. And there's not a lot of prescriptive stuff in astrology, which I think is right. It's very descriptive. There's little bits of prescription because really my prescription is usually I mean, I don't tell everybody to do the type of meditation that we do because it's actually not appropriate for some. I look at some charts, and honestly, I'll say like, no, you know what? This looks like like you can see the type of spiritual path that might fit somebody really well at different times in life. And sometimes it ain't mantra meditation. It's you need to just go to the gym and take up qigong and maybe connect with some kind of like psychosomatic dance therapy, and it ain't a one size fits all. And most people have a few different things that all work for them, but sometimes that's the thing. You know, Other people, it's like, no, you know what? I think your church is a garden, and you could throw a bunch of other stuff around that for right now, but maybe you connect with a meditation practice. But I think primarily, I want you to find a way to get yourself involved with plants and soil and things of that nature,
Mhm.
first. So this is where like I came into astrology as a chiefly a meditation teacher, not a didactic one size fits all guy by any means, but
Mhm.
certainly being working as an astrologer, I have a responsibility not to sort of like proselytize my other stuff,
Mhm.
and sort of force it onto people like a map. And just I'm trying to, as a reader, I'm trying to be very receptive and let the music come out, and then people ask whatever questions they need to ask, and that's a session. We could just go through the various songs of poetry that are already existing within the psyche. And I definitely invite people to be very skeptical of it because I mean, for God's sakes, before I studied astrology seriously, like seriously, I had just finished a degree in like the most stick up your ass kind of analytical philosophy you can do. And I was glad to have done that. And I was glad to sort of like really have like sharp critical thinking faculties. And I fully admit, you know, that like looking at astrology looks like so much got to be confirmation bias and all these other things. It's total. I think you should be totally okay with having that
Mhm.
mentation go on in the mind because I'm more of an empiricist than a rationalist. So I was convinced because in my own chart there were just it's such a strange, peculiar personality type, Scorpio, that with its pros and with its cons and the house system that it's in for me, that I there was just something too compelling in the sauce that seemed to cut well beyond confirmation bias, and that was ultimately one of the reasons I stayed on. But also, when I'll share this, I know I'm rambling a bit. Sorry for that. And, we'll have to cut off soon. But one of the fun things of my astrological education and the initial blush that I received from a really wonderful man, I got to give a plug to Rob Inglis of Vancouver, British Columbia, a beautiful soul, was, he'd bring out the charts of dead famous people and he'd put like tape or paper on top of their information so I wouldn't know who they were. And now the game was not for me to guess who the fuck they were, but that's what I turned it into because I wanted to be very like see how psychic I can get here. That was more fun than just like going through and like. And I remember this one chart, hit me, and I looked at it and be like, that's got to be Oprah Winfrey or someone exactly like Oprah Winfrey. And Rob was like, took the thing off. It's like Oprah Winfrey, and this would, this would
Oh,
continue. And
fun.
it was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do that. So there, enough of those hits where I didn't know, hadn't seen any of those birth charts before, was actually fairly convincing to me that at least there's something going on with this like crazy, half-cocked, contradictory mess in many ways. I mean, you got astrologers arguing like cats and dogs over house systems, and you get the Vedic people doing sidereal with a different zodiac and the tropical, which is me, usually a tropical zodiac people, and yet there's something weird that's what kept Jung's interest, and that's what helped get him fired by Sigmund Freud from the psychoanalytic fold. Is that Jung got a hold of astrology and he's like, oh yeah, very compelling, and he would not take his hand out of that cookie jar, and
Mhm.
so he had to be thrown out of the psychoanalytic movement, which wanted to be seen as wholly scientific. And so yeah, I you know got my hand in the same cookie jar, and like Jung, I can't really take it out because there's too many weird synchronicities that seem to uh, follow in its practice.
I love your approach, Ishtar. I love the approach. I love that it comes from a place of that deep wellspring that you shared. I feel that from you anyway. And I love that you've made meaning of it with your intellect as well. And that combination again that I was talking about earlier is it's so beautiful. It's full human. Um, I also love that you brought up, and I think this is really important. Um, our practice has worked for us, and I've seen it really, really not be okay and not be the right thing for other people.
Mm, yeah.
And thank you for doing that, for reinforcing that and I find it absolutely fascinating that you can look at a chart and be like, yeah, this plants, nature, your hands in the dirt, that's a path. That's what I see most blessing
Mm,
people
mm.
in this life, or the gym or whatever. Um, it's definitely Well, first of all, it blows my mind that you can look at a chart and like what you just did when I gave the example, here's where my stuff is at, and you're like, well, this is what I would read that as. And that's I believe what's going on in my existence. Someone else be something completely different.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
would be pertinent to them. And just these things that this divine intelligence have given us kind of to point us all back to the magic of it. I mean, for me, it's like this is all on purpose. Like that's how I feel
Mm.
about it when
Yes.
I
Yeah.
hear this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what's reinforced, and that was what got Jung's interest. He had like three things that he thought were like very significant synchronicity drivers in his experience, and they were doing the I Ching, tarot, and astrology. And with astrology, he was kind of not quite sure whether it was because there was something objective going on, which is how most astrologers would explain theirs, or whether because it's just for whatever reason it's a window to sort of into some kind of synchronicitous deeper order in which everything is. I don't know. It sounds starting to sound woo woo right now, but like really woo woo, but like interconnected. And I tend to be in the objective camp, but whatever. So
So
that's
you may, but I've always seen you as extremely celestial and extremely grounded, both,
yeah.
and loved to speak with you. In fact, I remember being on a like maybe a retreat or something with you in some backwoods snowy place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here's something you said to me. This is for some other time. We'll go into what this all means, but I was breastfeeding Lauren still, and I was pumping while I was on retreat. She was with her father, and I mean, I think she was like a year old, but I still was. And you you just were looking we were standing there talking, and I just remember all time and space kind of a moment. And you said, I can just see the soma so clearly in you. And first of all, not everybody knows what that is, and no, but you don't need to. But I knew in that moment that it was so. I also needed to hear it because I was at a moment in my life where I was feeling very extremely vulnerable and trying to recalibrate back as a brand new mother, back to the essence of the teaching of Ascension, which for me has nothing to do with Ascension and everything to do with presence. I mean, just semantically.
Yeah.
And you brought me back to that, but lit up the magic in my heart again, which you have done here again today. Just expanded both of those things, that grounding and that expansion. I don't know, what is the Sanskrit meaning of your name, or is
Well,
there?
said that it's not. I don't think that's actually my truest name either. I'm about to change it, but
Oh,
there's
fabulous.
something that's also very true about it, which was weird. I see that's a joke. So I joined my nice mystery cult on the Oregon coast, and I'm like everyone's got a Sanskrit name. I'm thinking I'm gonna get myself a Sanskrit name. As an 18-year-old, that was very exciting. You're not supposed to be
Sure.
excited about that, but yet I was. And so then they give me a name which ain't Sanskrit, which it doesn't mean that it's not. I'm not named after the Sumerian god or the Babylonian goddess of damn near everything.
Yeah.
No, no problem with that. But I also thought like, man, I was such an androgynous character at that time. I was like, of course I get a goddess name.
Mhm.
It didn't bother my masculinity at all. I've never really had that problem, right? Because strong women were a big part of my upbringing, so that it's just not an issue ever. But it was still kind of funny. But I was named basically after an 8 to 10 foot tall blue immortal dude out of MSI's pet mythology. I know who. Actually, I know that the structure of his books do have a structure, so I figured out that Ishtar is an emanation of Shiva in the seventh chakra, and so probably I have a different Sanskrit name. I'd probably translate it into Vamadeva or Ishana. or something like that. Probably Ishana, because that's the ruler of architecture. Anyways, I kind of figured out his code, with the different names. But yeah, it was named after an 8 to 10 foot tall blue immortal being who was into architecture and didn't really have that much written about him. His book didn't get written because MSI died in 97 with some outlines for future books just in outline form. So yeah, and this character apparently had built Shangri-La, Shambhala, whatever they called Vashti in the books, and had turned the world into a garden at one point, and then had become very lonely because everybody that they ever loved had either died or went to some other planet. And that was interesting to me because as a child, I had this night terror dream twice, one at age 6 and one at age 13. And the dream basically was I was like about 8 foot eight, very tall. I don't know how tall I was, but just I could see how tall the grass was and how where I was. So I was like, I felt like I was 10 feet tall, like a basketball hoop. And I had blue hands. And the sky was made out of grief for me. That was the thing. At first it was a beautiful scene, but then the grief was so much in this dream of the grief of being alone on a massive planet, like I was in Mongolia or Wyoming or someplace with big fields of grass, that I would wake up screaming to the sounds of my own scream with the lights on in my bedroom and all three of my family members holding my body down. And so this
Mm-hmm.
happened once at age 6. At age 13, it came back. I had this instinct to try to stay into the dream till the end, like it was a film that had a definite ending. But I couldn't do it at age 13. It was just so, it felt like I was getting hit on the chest with a giant hammer. And so same thing, woke up at age 20. It came again in the middle of my meditation teacher training, only this time, no screaming, no needing to wake up. I went to the end of the film and I never had the dream again. And I never mentioned that dream to the people. So I didn't stalk them to give me this name, Ishtar, in that way. But in that way, I think there is some accuracy or some interesting weird connection in the name. And one of my issues was being a bit too out of my body, and really uh, have a lot of the journey of this life was to feel safe again
Mm-hmm.
with people, basically, to come back in and get back in and not push people away and not I'm still learning this. I think not trying not to be like an arrogant prick, you know, which I think was always sort of an easy reaction that could happen to cover a wounding.
Mm-hmm.
And so the lesson seemed kind of similar to that character. So that was the genesis of that name. But funnily, I woke up like 2 days ago. I think, and this has happened many times over the last 10 years, even 22 years ago, when I got the name. I was like, that's right, but I don't think it's quite right. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of projection, but I think it also serves. So I ran with it, and I thought like it's kind of true, but not the full story. But like 3 days ago, I woke up and it's like I saw someone referring to me as Ishtar on social media, and it's like, who the fuck's that? It's like, I, I, it felt like something that a Velcro that was not connecting with this Velcro. So yeah.
I thank you for that. That's super magical. And I'm gonna turn it. I have like a desire to just keep going, and we're not going to. So I'm gonna just ask. Uh, I'm just gonna ask, what would you like to leave people with, especially for anybody who's watching, because I can have an audience who is already on their path, but and people in recovery, people who are looking for next level. The next level of the onion peel is coming off, and they're like, well, this has served me, and now I've like outgrown it, and what's next for me? And
Yeah.
I'm just giving you like who may or may not be watching. If
I gotcha right there, and I better do it because I've got 3 minutes to my next thing, but I'll say it right now is what there is an immense love in you, in your heart, outside you, doesn't matter in how these fall apart. There is an immense field of love. And this is the most wonderful active conspiracy in the world because it's a conspiracy for all of our goods. There's an immense field of love that is trying to flood through and break all the barriers. There is all really what we need to do. It might sometimes seem like an awful lot, and it is on certain levels. It can be a struggle, right? I'm not going to deny that, but I'll say that we only have to meet this vast field of love that's trying to penetrate our hearts 1/10 of the way, maybe 1/50th of the way, in terms of our output versus its response. Because in other words, there's a massive grace that's trying to come to us at all time, and it doesn't matter how much you fucked up. You know, we all have. It doesn't matter where we are coming in. All we have to do is find something in terms of spiritual practices, find something that just allows us to give ourselves permission to relax, over and over again. And that's like if grace is like getting struck by lightning, Rodasi, if grace is like getting struck by lightning, such thing is like walking up onto the top of a hill with a metal rod, under a thundercloud. And that's our agency is just making ourselves a little bit more prone to that accident. So that's what I had to say.
Thank you so much. I love you. I honor you. I see you. I'm so glad we finally reconnected in
Yeah.
this way, and I'm gonna just end it here. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll be sharing all that we can with you in the show notes, etc., and as well as how to contact Ishtar.